Hey there, folks. I've been living with this iSDT charger for a while now, and I've learned a few new things about it, and I've got some answers to questions that you guys specifically asked about in the last video and in between then and now. So, without further ado, let's say goodbye to Joshua from the future and hear what Joshua from the past has to say about this charger. Okay, folks, one of the questions I've gotten is, how does this thing perform on 12 volts? So I've currently got this plugged into 12 volts. It is usually the case that a charger will only achieve its full amp rating, its full watt rating, at a higher voltage, a higher input voltage, because there's a limit to the input amperage. And I have videos on all that. I won't go into the details on that now. But the bottom line is that if you have a high output charger, like a 300, 350, or even a 500 watt charger like this, you usually don't get that full output wattage if you're running on 12 volts. You usually have to be at least like 24 volts. What I'm going to do is, I've got it set up to charge. I've got 10 high volt batteries here, so 10 batteries, 20 amps. They're 1300 to 1500 milliamp hours. So we'll be at under 2C. So that's a safe thing to do. We're going to have 20 amps of output current, and we're going to see how much current it pulls. It ramps up slowly, which is probably a good thing. I don't know. Seems like that's a safe thing. We can see that the input amperage is higher than the output amperage, as would be expected. We've got a little bit of efficiency loss, of course, so you would always have more input than output because you're losing some to efficiency, but also it's stepping up the voltage from 12 volts to 14 and change, and so you're going to need more amps in to make the same watts out. So here we are at 23 input amps, 16.7 output amps, and it is holding. 23 times 12 is only 276 input watts, so in theory we have more to go. We are not at the output wattage limit of 500 watts or 20 amps. And I know this thing will hit 20 amps because, hang on, so that seems to be the stop there. I know this thing will hit 20 amps because, so now it's back on 24 volts. We will start the same charge cycle again and we'll see if it goes to 20 amps. And now we should see that the input amperage is lower than the output amperage because the input voltage is higher than the output voltage. Watts in equals watts out minus efficiency losses. And we're already over 16.8, 18. So it seems like the input limit in this test was around 23 amps. We seem to stop at 23 amps. And I can't think of anything that would cause that to occur except for the input amp limit, since we definitely were not at the output limit of 500 watts or 20 amps. So it seems like on 12 volts, based on this one test, one sample, the output that you can expect to get is about 16.8 amps. The other thing that's worth showing you is, I've actually been running this charge cycle for a little bit before I did this test, and I've been tracking the temperature. Some of you have been asking about the temperature in the comments. And the temperature, you'll see it gets to about 59-60 C, and if we're lucky, the fan will kick in right now and it'll make a great video. It gets to about 60 C, and then the fan kicks in and it pulls it back down to, oh, there we go. Yay! Good video making. At 60 C, the fan comes on. It quickly pulls it down to about 54-55 C, and it goes off. I've never seen it go above 60 C, even charging for a sustained time at 20 amps. So I haven't updated the firmware on this charger because I don't have the USB adapter to do it, but I am working on either making or getting one of those, and I will have a video up soon, as soon as I can, about updating the firmware. The new firmware, one of the things it does is every time you turn the charger on, it does a self-check test, and that means if you've got a battery plugged in, it won't do the self-check test, which means you have to unplug the battery every time if you have a battery sitting here and you power off for any reason. You got to unplug them to turn it back on, and that is super annoying. So the new firmware update fixes that. And I think the new firmware update also makes a fast charge cycle, although maybe the fast charge is already here and I missed it. People are telling me that the way it works is it bulk charges up to the point where one cell hits the limit, and then it switches to the balance program. And if you want to, you can just stop the program there, and that's your fast charge. Now, the other question that people ask is, how accurate is this thing in terms of its voltage? And so, just get three opinions and see if any two agree, right? My balance checker says 17.39. This says 17.4. Balance checker says 434, 436, 435, 434. This says 434, 435, 435, 435. So they're pretty close. And my multimeter says it's actually way off from those two. So either these two are wrong by exactly the same amount, or my multimeter is off. Oops. I'm guessing my multimeter is off, so there you go. I don't have... Oh, here we go. Here's another multimeter. Why not? Let's do some science. Hang on. Let's get another opinion here. You know, when you don't know the answer, just take a bunch of readings and take the average. And that certainly gives you the right answer, isn't it? 17.41. Yeah. Okay, so my ANOVA is out of calibration. Wow, that's really too bad. Well, good to know, but this guy is dead on. At least mine is. And that's going to bring us to the end of this video. Just a few notes before I go. I have since updated the firmware to the latest version. It was pretty smooth. There's videos out there explaining how to do it. And if you need the adapter to connect it up to your computer, there's videos out there explaining how to do that as well. I just bought, for $8, I bought the adapter off of Banggood and just used the adapter. Now I have one and I'll probably never use it again, but there you go. As I said in the video, the new firmware, I would call it an essential upgrade because it does get rid of that self-check function that when you first power up. And in case I wasn't clear there, you know, if you leave a battery on the charger, for example, if you parallel charge like me and you leave the batteries on the parallel board, maybe you do a storage charge and then you come back later and you're going to finish them off, or maybe you just stop the charge because you have to walk away for a minute. When you power the charger up, it does that self-test, and if the batteries are plugged in, it won't power up. You have to unplug the balance board from the charger or the battery every time you power it up. And the new firmware gets rid of that silly thing, and you can just leave the batteries plugged in if that's what you like to do. So I feel like that's a pretty big deal for me because I parallel charge. I do that a lot. The other thing is that it does have the balance charge versus fast charge functionality as I described in the video. I actually think that is in the original firmware and I just missed it. So you put it on the charge, you start the charge cycle. When the fast charge is done, it beeps one time and then it keeps charging. And if you want to go fly, you just take them off. If you want them to be balance charged, you just leave them on, which is actually a pretty clever way of doing it. I just missed it the first time. Overall, I'm really happy with this charger so far. It's become my main charger, and not just because it does high volts, whereas the other ones I have don't. It's a great all-around charger. I take it on trips with me, and even when I don't bring my great big power supply that can do, umpteen jillion watts, I just bring like a 150 watt power supply and I lower the watt limit on the charger temporarily, and then I can still do charging with it. It's not quite as fast as it would be, but it's still just a fantastic charger. I have heard some reports from some people who have had some issues with these. Some people, they smoke shortly after they get them. And of course, anytime you're ordering from China, there's always a question of whether the quality control is going to be there. And I don't think it's controversial to suggest that maybe the quality control on this charger is not quite at the level of something like an iCharger, for example. But overall, I don't think I've seen enough smoke, metaphorically and literally, to suggest that there's any widespread quality issues here. And overall, I still feel like I can strongly recommend this product. Thank you for watching. Happy flying.